Welcome to Chapter 16, Social-Emotional Development in Late Adulthood. In this chapter, we will cover the following topics: theories of social-emotional development, personality and society, families and social relationships, ethnicity, gender and culture, and finally, successful aging. The first section will be theories of social-emotional development. Excuse me. And it will cover four different theories. This is where I'm really concentrating on in this chapter, and so the test will include mostly items from this section. Let's look at these four different theories of social emotional development in regards to late adulthood. The first is Erikssons Theory. So we revisit our good friend Erik Erikson for his final lifespan stage in his 8-stage theory. And this is the stage of integrity versus despair, the last stage of development in life. Integrity means developing a sense of, I guess, a sense of peace in regards to the life that you've lived. You feel a sense of integrity if you're happy with your life and happy with the choices you've made throughout your life. If, on the other hand, you feel that your life is unfinished and there's something you must complete in order to make your life complete, you may experience a sense of despair that time is running out and that you're not ready to leave this life yet. Those that develop integrity tend to enjoy their remaining years in life, whereas those that are in a sense of despair, they tend to fear death, and this may cause them to suffer for their remaining years. In order to develop a sense of integrity, we need to reflect on our past, and we piece together a positive review of the life that we have lived. We do this by engaging in what's called a life review, looking back at one's life experiences, evaluating them, interpreting and reinterpreting them. And this is seen as a chance to develop mature wisdom and understanding. As you look back and make sense of your life, you gain wisdom about how to live life, and you can see what result certain choices that you made earlier in your life resulted in. This is is what is seen to contribute to an older adult's wisdom. The fact that they've lived through so many things, and by conducting the life review, they make sense of it and they can see the connections throughout their life. Robert Butler is a distinguished aging researcher, and he states that this life review is really set in motion by looking forward to death, or looking, maybe I should say looking ahead to death. I mean, you're not looking forward to it like you're welcoming it, but you're looking ahead to your upcoming death. You have less years left, and this is what sets it in motion. Reminiscence therapy is a type of therapy to help an older adult engage in a life review. So it involves discussing past activities and experiences with another individual or within a group setting. The therapy may include the use of photographs, familiar items, video or audio recordings, etc. And once again, this is a chance to help an older person, make sense of their life and engage in that all important life review. And that's Erikson's final stage of lifespan development. The second theory in this section is called activity theory. This one I only talked about briefly. There's not a lot to it. It basically says that the more active and involved older adults are, the more likely they are to be satisfied with their lives. And so if older adults continue part-time work or they do volunteer work, this theory would suggest that they would be more satisfied. They may take a role in, I don't know, in their church life, take some kind of position, or in their residence or nursing home. They may, volunteer to take on responsibilities. I mean, all of these types of activities would be considered, involved activities, and it should make, this theory says it will make them happier, or at least, I guess the term is more satisfied with their lives. Okay, and that's all activity theory says. The more active and involved you are, the more life satisfaction you have. The third theory is socioemotional selectivity theory. This theory states that older adults become more selective about their social networks. They spend more time with individuals with whom they have had rewarding relationships with in the past, and so they prune their social networks. In essence, they cut out those that they may not have great relationships with, or those that they have less involved relationships with. They kind of get rid of the acquaintances, that we all have in our lives, and they focus just on their most meaningful relationships. Now, this theory really challenges the stereotype of emotional despair in older adults due to social isolation. So one thing that has been suggested in the past, or at least stereotyped, is that older adults have less connections, and so they are in emotional despair because they lose their social networks. This theory is basically saying that is purposeful. They haven't, lost their social networks out of necessity. I mean, they've chosen to trim down their social networks, and so it's a purposeful activity. So they don't feel emotional despair because of it. They're just concentrating on the joy that they find in their most rewarding relationships. Continuing with this third theory, the social emotional selectivity theories also talks about how our goals change from one period of life to another, and so as our goals change, then this will change what activities we concentrate on at each point in life. Um, the theory talks about two major types of goals: knowledge related and emotional goals, and that each has a different trajectory throughout the lifespan. Let me go through that briefly here. So they say that your motivation for knowledge related goals is high in your early years of life. Think about a child, they want knowledge. It peaks in adolescence and early adulthood. And this is the time that you're going to high school and then into college or university, and so you get the peaking of your knowledge related goals. And then it declines in middle and late adulthood. As we get older, we're not as concerned with finding new knowledge and gaining new knowledge. when we look at emotional goals, our motivation for those are high during infancy and early childhood. Very early in life, you're learning about new emotions, so you have a lot of motivation in that area. They decline from middle childhood to early adulthood. So learning and dealing with emotions are less important, during your adolescence, for instance, and into your early adulthood, mainly because your knowledge-related goals are increasing. You're searching knowledge as you go to high school and you go into college and university, and things like emotional relationships are kind of taking a little bit of a back seat towards to the knowledge goals. But then your emotional related goals increases as you get into middle and later adulthood. And this is part of the theory that as your emotional goals increase in older adult years, this is one of the reasons why you kind of prune your social network. You concentrate only on those relationships that are fulfilling your emotional goals of that age. Um, okay. One last thing I guess I'll mention that this theory talks about is that older adults um, feel that the older adults' feelings tend to mellow somewhat compared to the younger time periods. They have fewer highs and lows in life, and even though they have they have less extreme high and lows in emotions. I mean, overall, this is more satisfying to them because they feel a sense of contentment, and that their sense of contentment is greater than in early or middle adulthood periods. So less extreme highs and lows, more mellow feelings, but more overall contentment. Okay, the fourth theory in this section is the selective optimization with compensation theory. This theory comes from Paul Baltes, B-A-L-T-E-S, B-A-L-T-E-S, Paul Baltes, from 2006. And basically, this theory states that older adults can continue to lead satisfying lives, although in a more restricted manner. So the three main factors of this theory are selection, optimization, and compensation. Let me go through these here. Selection just means that you have to be more selective in which kinds of behaviors and which kinds of interests you can continue to pursue in older adulthood. So as an older adult, perhaps you give up rock climbing and sailing, and instead you concentrate more on playing the piano. So you have to be more selective. Then after you kind of selected which goals are most important to you and which behaviors or interests you want to continue, you optimize your performance in those areas. So you're spreading your time less. You have less activities and behaviors you're spreading your time out among, and so you're optimizing the things that you can still do and still want to do. So you maintain performance in some areas through continued practice and use of new technologies. So as an example, perhaps an older adult practices piano more than they did in their youth in order to maintain their status, as a expert piano player. So they practice more. this is they're optimizing in that area. I can still play piano. I've given up other things, but I'm going to optimize my abilities by working at this one area that's important to me. And finally, compensation is using whatever means are necessary to compensate for things that you can no longer do. So you need to compensate, as it says here, when life tasks require a high level of capacity. So for perhaps that piano player that I've been talking about, maybe he gives performances still, and when he walks on stage to his piano, he walks on stage using a cane. That's a simple example of compensation. Because of his age, he has perhaps trouble walking, and uses a cane to assist himself. So compensation is just using whatever is available, using technology or instruments that are available in order to compensate for things that you cannot do as well as in your youth. So once again, that's kind of the major part of this theory: selection, optimization, and compensation. Select activities that are most important. Do less. You do less behaviors and activities. You optimize in the ones that are most important. Spend more time on them in order to maintain your skill level, and you compensate when needed for things that you can no longer do unassisted. Compensation may involve using some kind of instrument, such as a cane or a wheelchair, or you may compensate by relying on others to help you in areas where you cannot do things on your own. Going back to the topic of selection in this theory, the selection of domains and life priorities is an important aspect of development, according to this theory. It's important to be able to select what's most critical for your life and what's most important for your life. This theory maintains that it's the attainment of meaningful goals that makes life satisfying. And so we have to figure out what's meaningful for each of us. What are the goals I want to optimize at this particular time in life? Anyways, so based on this idea of selection, this study was done looking at different age periods and which goals were most important to individuals at those particular ages. And you can see that there is certainly a shift through the adult years from early in adulthood, where work is the most important goal, and then in more middle adulthood years, we get family becoming the most important aspect of our lives, and then in our later adult years, health concerns obviously start to dominate. So you can see the kind of pattern of what the most important personal investments are at each age, and this kind of speaks to that selection process. Depending on how old you are, you will select different aspects of your life, different goals, different activities as being most important, and you will tend to optimize your behavior in those particular areas. Okay, and those are 4 theories concerning social-emotional development in older adult years. The second section of chapter 16 has to do with personality and society. Personality, we can return to the big 5 and the big 5 personality factors. They certainly, they change throughout adulthood somewhat, and they certainly have an effect on things such as lifespan and the risk of certain diseases and things like that. So I do want you to just read through this little list here and then also in the textbook, and it kind of states the connection between having certain personality factors and how it affects our life into late adulthood. I talked about some of this in an earlier chapter. Remember, conscientiousness tends to make you live longer because you engage in good habits, whereas neuroticism, causes you more stress in life, tends to predict an earlier death. Some of these characteristics have effects on your odds of developing dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So do read about this more in the book. Stereotyping older adults. We refer to prejudice against older adults as ageism. The most frequent forms include disrespect for older adults and assumptions about their ailments and frailty. Because they're old, they can't do certain things, because they're old, they're going to have certain illnesses. In a work situation, you might suspect that because they're older, they're going to have more sick days, and so cost you money. Turns out that the older adults tend to be very responsible at work and actually tend to have less overall sick days, but ageism is just the assumption of these things because somebody is older. Some policy issues concerning older adults in the U.S. As it says here, the status of the economy, there is concern that the U.S. economy cannot bear the burden of older adults who are generally consumers. They're consumers rather than producers. And remember, I did talk about the rectangularization of age distribution in the U.S. That now more than ever we have more older adults that are living because our life expectancy has increased, and also because the boomers have all aged and have become older adults. We have a large group of older adults. They do consume rather than produce. They also affect healthcare expenditures. Older adults increase healthcare costs considerably. Many have chronic illnesses. In fact, they say that those who are 65 plus in the U.S. Account for 1/3 of total healthcare expenses. And yet they only make up 12% of the population. So 12% of the population accounts for approximately 33% of healthcare expenses in the U.S. So it is, older adults are considered somewhat of I hate to say it, somewhat of a burden or a drain on society in a sense. But one way to look at it is that they have up to contribute to society for their whole lives, and we have responsibilities of society to make sure that our elder population is cared for. And this brings us to elder care, the physical and emotional caretaking for older family members. Elder care is becoming more and more of an issue because we are living longer. We do have a more aged population. We have a lot more adults that have to engage in elder care because of this. And that's going to wrap up this first video from chapter 16.